But I let the fire in the boiler burn down to ashes and left myself with the cold smokestack. Now I'm trying to turn coal into cut diamonds, give rise to the phoenix heavy wings, reaching for the sky, yearning to fly and find out why a caged bird still sings. Daring to drive the dark highways of the night, guided by the light of the moon, trusting that the gasoline gauge is reading right when it feels like I'm running, feels like I'm running on fumes, running on fumes. I'm counting on fate to get me over this mountain, across unfamiliar terrain, that'll lead back into the great wide open, will lead me back home again. My compass rightly needs a little calibration, need to burn my internal map. I've come to believe that to find myself, getting lost is the only way back. Daring to drive the dark highways of the night, guided by the light of the moon, trusting that the gasoline gauge is reading right when it feels like I'm running, feels like I'm running on fumes. Thirsty for water in a sea of desert, time slipping through my hands, working my way to a new horizon, leaving footprints in the sand, footprints in the sand, running on fumes. Daring to drive the dark highways of the night, guided by the light of the moon, trusting that the gasoline gauge is reading right when it feels like I'm running, feels like I'm running. Daring to drive, guided by the light of the moon, daring to drive when it feels like I'm running, feels like I'm running on fumes, running on fumes.
Welcome, one and all, and it was beautiful to hear Mr. David Grissom rocking out. This is 20 Question Tuesdays. I am Jeff Plankenhorn. Oh, got to put up the old hello this week with Mr. David Grissom. For those of you who don't know, basically this started during the pandemic. I just flipped on my camera one day and started taking questions as far as guitar and songwriting and slide and being in the business. And it was so cool because so many people from every walk of life, whether they play music or they're just an enthusiast, started coming on and asking absolutely beautiful questions. And it's built from there. Austin Music TV, channel 16 on most of your cable channels, channel 99 on ATTUverse. Thank you so much for broadcasting this every week. And as always, I split the tips with my guests, so we really appreciate that as well. And, you're helping out a couple of underemployed musicians who are going to have a great chat for you. And every week it's just really, really been beautiful. Next week I have Mobley. The week after I have Sarah Hickman. Next month I've got Gary Nicholson, a few others. And you can always go back and watch these. I keep them archived. So thank you, everybody, for keeping this going and for the great questions I've already gotten so far for Mr. Grissom. I should also mention, I always forget that I have a Patreon page, and you can look that up. And then I also have my live stream tonight at 6 p.m. I'm really bad at promoting myself, but I like promoting other people. It just feels better. So besides that, I think we're going to get right into it. And without further ado, here is our friend, Mr. David Grissom, everybody. Welcome, David.
Hey, man. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm up here, of course, on Vancouver Island. Now, you're in Austin right now?
I'm in Austin. Yeah.
Faring okay?
I'm faring pretty well, considering I'm jealous that you're in Vancouver, but
yeah, well, you won't be when you see the weather is finally changing. So even though it's a little bit more, shall we say, balmy on Vancouver Island than in Vancouver proper, it's still it's getting rainy and cold. So
I wouldn't mind a rainy day. I mean, I kind of fantasize about that, but I know that about 2 days in, I'd be complaining.
It's funny. I haven't started complaining yet, even though I'm even to the point where I'm starting to call my Kappa Toque because everybody calls them toques. So that has happened. But like I've said many times before, if I could ever get my wife to say y'all and a in the same sentence, then I believe I will have done something for bringing our two countries together. And I've gotten close. I've almost heard her say y'all.
How y'all doing, eh?
I mean, right? It could work just like that. Just like that, it could work. And I mean, it'll probably happen with me before it happens with her. Listen, we have already some absolutely fantastic questions, and I have all these great people online right now who are just raring down. That's the thing that I love about this show more than anything, is that it's not my questions. It all comes from the people who are watching on the various platforms. And I'm just going to randomly jump out at one. This question I think is really, really cool, and it reminds me of a time when I was in a band that was opening up for a band that you were on tour with, which was the Chicks. And they were called the Dixie Chicks back then. And I remember a specific night where this question, I'm really interested to how you take on this question. It's from one of our people who watches a lot named Randy Dees. Randy Dees asks, what do you think of like gigs? He mentioned something about when you're playing with Mellencamp and somebody's off stage who's like, clicking the pedals so that the people on stage don't have to, and it's a little bit more of a show. When you break the wall down for like those really, really big stadium acts, there's a lot of production that goes into it. And a lot of times you have to play the same songs every night in order, the same way, the same solos. And for a cat like you, who's a very expressive guitar player, I can imagine that might be a little bit, it's just tough to like, man, I really want to stretch out a little bit. His question is, what do you think of playing the same songs every night in that kind of a setting?
It's not my preference anymore. I'm kind of at the point in my life where, to be frank, going down to the Saxon and doing my gig with my band on Tuesday night is rewarding on a much different level. I mean, I love being those tours. I've done a lot of big tours, and they all have their incredible, exciting high moments to them. But it's true that it becomes more like theater than music about halfway through the tour, in that like the lighting guys bugging you at sound check, you need to be in this spot right at that point so that I can hit you when you play your lick or whatever. And there's so many cues that the lighting people are in on, and the artist, you know, if you play something different or weird, it can throw the artist off. It really does become like theater. Now with Mellencamp, there was like one spot in particular where I could stretch, but really for kind of as long as I wanted. So that was unusual for a gig like that. Other than that, it was note for note.
Yeah.
And with the Chicks, it was pretty much note for note. You know, on my solos, they would, you know, my 8-bar solo, they were cool, you know, whatever you want to play. But basically, other than that, it was definitely like what happens is, and what is extremely disconcerting at times is that what I found, you know, 6 months into the tour, you've got in-ears, which already removes you. You know, you're 1 degree removed from the audience. To me, it's more like being in a studio because you're not really hearing the ambient crowd noise as much. And I can't tell you how many times I found myself in the middle of a show with 20,000 people there. And like, it's like when you're driving down the highway and all of a sudden you realize you've been driving for 15 minutes and now
you forgot because you were on autopilot.
You were on autopilot. I'll wake up in the middle of a song, like literally almost wake up. And then the tour goes on longer. And then you're like, well, if I think too much, then I'm screwed because everything is so automatic under my fingers. If I start thinking about how do I play that chord? And I literally have to make myself look away or turn that part of my brain off really, really fast. But, you know, it's just part of the deal. I mean, it's a team sport. And that's why we pick these other outlets that, you know, we look for these other outlets so that we get a balance of the two.
I think that's exactly right. And what happened on that tour was I was having the time of my life. It was not my first like major stadium tour with anybody doing openers or doing shows, but it was one of the first. And, it might have been like 15 years ago or something like that. And I remember one night, the cat that I was playing with, we had a night off on tour and he booked his own gig. And so we're all kind of out at the bus, and we're back at the stadium for the next gig on tour. And I see you, and you say, "Hey man, how you doing?" And I said, "Oh man, we had a gig last night, and it was like a long gig, and we were able to like stretch out." And you said, "That'd be nice," you know. And it was like blew my mind for a second because I was like, "Oh my gosh," you know, like I just didn't even think about the fact that you were doing the same thing of, you know, a real straight ahead show. And it kind of has to be that way too. It's not to like diss on the people who are doing the show. Like once you get into that 20,000 seat thing, it's a little bit more difficult to have a free form. I'm going to stretch out on every song because the light is going to mess up and the sound is going to mess up. And, you know, it's kind of part of that. Once you get to that level, that's one of the things that, not for me to ramble, but staying at a level that doesn't get there is really where a lot of people like to stay.
Yeah.
Because they have a happy life and they get to play. Like, I remember talking to you about Mac a couple of days ago. We were talking about the show maybe yesterday. He was like, you know, my favorite thing in the world is to play a rock and roll club where people are like talking and dancing and rocking and having fun. And once it gets above that, he kind of lost his feel for it.
Now, I will qualify that with one experience that I had, in that I did 3 weeks with the Allman Brothers many moons ago, and that experience was just basically like taking the gig at the Saxon and putting it in a huge amphitheater with 20 or 25,000 people there. It was like the world's largest jazz show. I mean, the first time that I played with them, you know, they came and said, "You need to play longer solos."
Nobody says that to us.
No one has ever said that to me before, or play louder. And you know, it was just the freakiest thing to play a 4 or 5 minute solo over Dreams or Elizabeth Reed or whatever, and they have the whole place erupt with applause at the end of the solo, like you know, if you're in the Village Vanguard or at the Saxon or whatever, where people respond. They're really listening. I mean, they're listening, but there's also that community. Everybody on stage is really listening, and that's just the gig, though. It's like,
hey, I need to interrupt for just 1 second because I just saw a message that said channel 16 is black. So I'm going to take 2 seconds and make sure that the setup has it on. It looks like it turned off for some reason. Hey, Sheila, I'm sorry for that. Sorry about the first 10 minutes being off. I have turned it off and turned it back on. These Restream apps that everybody has, I'm telling you, something goes wrong every single week. Sheila, let me know if it comes on in the comments. Thank you so much for telling us. I turned it off and on, so hopefully it'll come back. If you're just tuning in on Austin Music TV, this is 20 Question Tuesdays. I'm Jeff Plankenhorn. This is David Grissom, and we're in the middle of taking great questions from the audience and on various platforms. A lot of people asked, just to get you back into what you were talking. I'm seamless at this hosting thing, as you can tell.
pro.
A lot. Oh yeah. I always like to say I'm keeping up the facade that I'm a professional. There's been plenty of people who have asked, like, how did you get the call to fill in for Dickie Betts, or to do that? Was it just like was it management, or was it?
Well, I was in O'Hare Airport, flying home from. I just done some gigs with Mellencamp and Bob Dylan. It was like a flood relief. We did these shows when they had this really bad flooding around St. Louis and the Midwest. And it was before cell phones, before everybody had a cell phone. And I called home and called my wife. She said, the Allman Brothers just called, want to know if you could come out and fill in for Dickie Betts. And I'm like, well, hell yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, when? And they go, well, it's tonight or tomorrow. And she gave me the number, and I called and got a machine and left a message, and then flew from O'Hare back to Austin. And when I landed, I had a message saying, we got somebody else. And of course I was crushed. The next day I'm hanging around, I'm down on South Lamar at Music Makers, just hanging out. And I get paged. Who gets paged at Music Makers?
Yeah,
and,
right.
It's Shelly. She says, man, they called back. And the guy didn't work out. And they want to know if you could be on a plane in 2 hours. And so I raced home, got my guitar and packed a bag and went back and flew to DC. They picked me up on the curb at midnight in the tour bus. And the next night we played Merriweather Post Pavilion. Warren Haynes, I knew Warren, and he pretty much, I think, that was the connection there. And we had a 45-minute sound check and a 45, that was it. Sound check and rehearsal for 45 minutes. And luckily, when I was in high school, I learned all those songs.
You had already learned a fair amount of it.
And it came back. I had no time to practice at all. But it came back. I love that band, and in high school, I can remember fantasizing, what would it be like if you could really play with the Allman Brothers? And, when you're learning to play, I think that's something you do, to play with the music that you're learning at the time or you're influenced by. And so to stand up there and play those songs and, feel Butch Trucks and J-Mo behind me, and I'm standing right next to Greg, it was freaky, man.
I find that, a lot of people say, be careful about meeting your heroes, et cetera, et cetera. I will say this, in my humble experience, the few times that I've gotten to play with somebody that I really loved, regardless of what life was like, the other half, the 50% of being on the road with somebody, that has been everything I expected it to be in a lot of ways. I tend to think that we may not know what a person is like, off stage, but if we vibe with them musically, chances are, once we was that your experience too? Is it like, okay, now this is a band I can just let loose and jam with, and they're encouraging me along the way?
Totally. They were, and it was so refreshing because I had been with Mellencamp for 3 years, and it was just run like the Army. And, with the Allman Brothers, it was like everybody kind of, all right, it's time to go. And we'd all kind of gather around the stage. The lights would go out, walk up. Everybody would tune up. And then, it was still dark. And then the road manager would come out and introduce the band. And then there was Statesboro Blues. And
Yeah.
a 3 hour show. And it really kind of made me come back to the fact that this is really what I do. This is why I started doing this. And so while the 3 years I got to play with John were awesome in their own way, that was sort of the catalyst for me moving away from that. And when I left John, I got a call to do Rod Stewart. And
Right.
at the very same time, the Storyville thing started to percolate. And I just felt, it was just one of those situations where, all right, I just went through this. It was the one time in my life that Shelley said I was making the wrong, she said, I think you should take the Rod Stewart thing. I mean, it's a lot of money, blah, 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 blah. But I felt like Storyville, there was just like this potential there. It could really be something special. And so I went that way.
I think a lot of times we have to go with our gut. I think a lot of times also for the musicians who watch on right now, we think to ourselves, we missed that one phone call and we're going to miss that opportunity that changes our life. There is an element of truth to that, but don't you also necessarily feel that like it's not gonna necessarily mean the downfall of your existence to go where your heart's going?
I mean, that's one thing that I can say unequivocally. If there's any reason I'm still working, or it is that I've always gone with my gut, and I've always tried to choose and put myself in situations where I would learn.
Yeah.
And that was not always going for the most money, but I took so many things early on that musically weren't the greatest situations but they were, it was to go play at a VFW behind chicken wire. And I wanted to learn how to handle that situation. I mean, I took every gig initially, and then as I was able to be more selective, then I had the opportunity to say, no, this feels better. And it really, and I have to really credit Joe Ely with that rubbing off on me. If somebody I've worked with in my life who's the consummate artist, it's him. And I saw 5 years of him making decisions based on what I'm talking about, music, leaving nothing on the table at the end of the gig. And he had so many chances, several chances that I witnessed to sort of like catapult into this, the Texas Springsteen or whatever. And and he made decisions that he said no to that several times, and consequently he's flourishing and has never stopped growing. And so that was a huge gift and learning experience that I picked, that I really think one of the greatest things I got from Joe was that approach to moving.
You and I have actually spoken before. Oh, and I always have to apologize. Something about this medium, it's very easy to interrupt my guests. So I apologize for when that happens with the interwebs and stuff. You and I have spoken before about Ely being one of those cats that playing with is like, you're really learning like the how-tos. How do you treat a band? How do you, take care of your musicians? How do you give them space? How do you be on the road with them? How do you, keep your integrity as a musician? You just kind of look at a cat like him. That was one of the people that I played with where I learned the most, about those things without him ever pointing a finger ever and saying, this is how you do it. Never once did I ever hear him say, this is how you do it. I just watch by example and go, I mean, my example with Ely is one time we had a duo gig that was booked in Tulsa, and man, it was a booking coup. It was just like, there was no one there. There might have been 5 people there, and every other place we played on tour was sold out or close to it. And so somebody had screwed up. Somebody had messed up something. Joe, made a funny comment before we went out on stage, and we played that night like it was every other night we ever played. And I was kind of taken aback by his energy and his want to play for these 5 people or whatever it was, a ridiculously small crowd for Joe. And and that kind of learning, man, long story short, too late, it just doesn't come, from everybody that
Yeah.
we have the pleasure of playing with.
No, there's no doubt about it. And I'll share my exact same
Please.
experience. Was, in Europe, we were on this sort of rather low budget European tour, and where we were in a constant state of exhaustion. We got our van stolen one night. We missed a ferry. We got stopped at the Italian border by, before it was the EU, and so every country
for the Union,
you had to go through customs and whatever, and the Italian border guards held us, and we missed the big anchor date in France. And anyway, we ended up in some club in Germany, and there was the same deal, like 10 people there, and the PA was like, they got it at Sears or something. Like
I've been there
50 years ago, and I'm thinking, this is just unbelievable. Why are we even playing the gig? And we went out, and Joe destroyed the place. It was the most intense night I could ever remember. He literally destroyed, probably destroyed the mic stand. And I'm sure the 10 people.
He's a presence. He's a physical presence too.
The 10 people were there had to go back and tell 100 people, like, you can't believe this dude. And that's not why Joe's doing it. Joe's just doing it because it's just Joe. And I didn't become a musician until I got in his band. I mean, I knew how to play guitar, and I could play songs, and I could learn songs, and I could get up on stage with people. But I didn't really become a musician until I worked with Joe.
I think that's a really incredible way to put it. Well, let's take a fun left turn, because one of the things I love about the show is that sometimes we get questions that are a little bit more technical, and sometimes we get questions that are a little bit more about the heart. I love this question, and it is from one of my friends who is a fantastic guitar player, and I love this question. He sent it to me earlier today when he knew you were going to be on. Dave Scher asks, we all know Dave Scher, he's a great Austin guitar player. When did you roughly start sending tracks? And what I mean by that, for the people who are not in the know, a lot of times we will send tracks from our home studios to various places, aka Nashville, LA, New York, whatever, and play on people's records. And he wanted to know, number one, when did you roughly start doing it, and when did it become normal that an artist might say, well, I don't have to fly David in, because I know he can make it sound every bit as good from what he's got at home. The only thing we're missing is necessarily that human communication. But if I really want Grissom on this track, I can call him. So when did that start, and when did it kind of become a little bit more normal?
I think it becomes more normal by the day, and that's really what I'm doing now. I mean, I did 10 songs for somebody last week. It's I think I started doing it about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it just gets more and more common. And now there are apps that are coming out that I've done once, where you really you can interact and hear.
Pretty close to real time.
I can play what's coming out of my system right now. I'm just talking through the built-in microphone, but I can send a feed directly to them, and they can give feedback, which sometimes is good. Sometimes
sometimes it gets in the way.
Sometimes I prefer not having the feedback and doing my own thing on my own time and with my own coffee machine here.
Oh, I miss your coffee. I miss hanging out and having a cup of coffee at your place. Anyway, go on.
It's become extremely common now, and of course, it's the like a lot of things in the music business. You're sort of now expected to have your own studio, but you don't get paid for the use of the studio. So that's an interesting phenomenon, because if you had to go to a studio to get me to play on it, you would have to pay the studio for that.
The studio, yeah, but we don't get that from the home.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting business model, but I'm down with it. I love to do it. I love to make records, period.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing now that I can do. It's Tuesday, man. Tuesday. I know. I'm supposed to be at the Saxon at 6:00 tonight,
right?
Levitating with two other incredible musicians. And, so if I can play on somebody's record here in my humble 7-foot ceiling cubby hole, that's a fun thing to do. I love doing it.
It's a real blessing that we can do it, but I want to touch back on something that you said, because I think it's interesting for the people who are asking us to do it. And I think it's possible. And also, don't be afraid to ask too, because a lot of times people are like, well, I don't know, such and such is too busy. Please ask David if you want, a track on a record, if he can do it, please mention it. And here, just because we're talking about this sort of thing, boom, right there. But with regards to the idea of sometimes it's more fun when they don't give me too much, I find that every single person who asks me to do a remote track, I kind of come up with a different plan for them.
Yeah.
And it's always different. It's like, okay, from what you're telling me, I'm going to give you 4 stems, of meaning 4 full tracks where I play through the whole thing. And then you can look at those and you can say, well, I like this, I like this, I like this. And then there's other people that I'm like, okay, you just need this bridge. And I'm not going to make any noise anywhere else. I may give you some rhythm guitar, I may give this. Do you find that with every single one, and then other ones I'll go back to and I'll say, you got to give me some feedback here, because it's just completely open and I have the entire world to pull from, and some of them will say, just do what you do. And some of them will say, well, I really love what you did on this record. But I love that. And it kind of makes it exciting just sitting here in my home studio. Talk a little bit about your process with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I get paid, just like if I was going into a studio, I'm getting paid to bring my ideas to the table. And I don't I often do an entire record with no direction whatsoever. Like, if the producer will send it to me and say, we were thinking kind of like I just did one last week and they were like, the guy really likes the old 97s. So I'm like, I kind of know, the old 97s and whatever. And but I try to just listen to the song. And
play to the song
and the lyric and play the thing. And I'm getting paid to come up with stuff for them. And I can't tell you how many times. I mean, I get tracks all the time that are drums and bass and a scratch acoustic guitar and a scratch vocal. And I have 8 bars of 1 chord out front. And, I mean, it's not unusual on the project I did last week. I did on a couple of the songs, I put 7 parts on. And, acoustic, electric, baritones, high strings.
I love high strung. High strung is so great. Yeah.
It's really, it's song by song, but then I work for other people. I've worked a lot this year with a guy you've worked with, Ross Hogarth. Who I just did a couple tracks on an Edgar Winter record for him.
Ooh, yeah.
Which is a tribute to Johnny. And then I did the whole new James McMurtry record. And
with Ross as well.
With Ross as well. Ross is like down to the inflection on every note. He's
very particular.
He's extremely particular. But he makes great sounding records. There's just different ways to do it. And I respect all ways, and I always learn something from him too. It's completely different than the project I did last week. But with Ross, you got to up your game, and he's used to standing right next to you. And so that's where the lack of being able to have the interaction kind of doubles the time it takes to get him what he's looking for.
From a home studio. I get it. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, your ability to adapt is something that's going to help with your longevity too, and being able to, look at different situations and still be able to use your voice, but at the same time, kind of give the people what they want to a certain extent. Sometimes we're not the guy. Sometimes, there's that great story. Oh, it's so corny, but I love it. About the saxophone player, David Sanborn, and somebody gets him in the studio and they say, hey man, we really, really want this to sound like Clarence Clemens. And he goes, oh, okay. Can you turn down the lights? Because it's the mood is just I want to really get in the mood for this one. And they go, okay, and they start the track. He goes, you know what? Hey, stop. Can you turn down the lights a little bit more? And suffice to say, eventually they turn the lights all the way down, and then they start the track, and they don't hear anything, and then they turn the lights up, and he's left.
Yeah, he's David Sanborn, man. What
You call it David Sanborn to be David Sanborn, you know? But I, as much as I don't have that personal attitude myself, I applaud it in a way. You know what I mean?
Well, it's a service industry, man. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm working for somebody else, and I'm going to try to give them what I want. If it gets, I hopefully don't have that much ego that at some point I may have to say, I don't think I'm the guy for this, and don't worry about paying me. And I'm sorry, but I just don't think that I'm the guy. I don't really know that I think I've done that one time.
And you got to be able to say that, and hopefully it doesn't ever come to that. But that's integrity on both parts, and also not taking it personal on both parts. You know, I played with a lot of people where I was their live guy, not a lot, a couple, where I was the live guy, and here I am helping this person write tunes, and here I am helping them come up with stuff, and then they go in the studio and they use somebody else. And you know what I had to do? Suck it up.
Yeah.
And just be like, well, do I want the gig anymore, or do I not want the gig anymore? You know, and that's basically a nice learning experience. That person had a really, really, really great working relationship with a guitar player producer whenever they were in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, you know, I was their multi-bag guy who played a bunch of different instruments. He wasn't hiring me for my voice on instruments, and so be it, whatever, time to move on. Speaking of time to move on, I love this question too. We haven't had like one technical guitar question yet, and I would like to go full screen, even if it was just for a second. Could you just do this is a person who wants to know a little bit about your hybrid picking technique. And I mean, just having one technique question is tough because, you know, but if I could just make you full screen and give you just a minute to explain, and you can tell me when you're ready for me to come back, but I'll go down in here in this little corner, and now we can see David's guitar a little bit better. But you know, if you could talk a little bit about it.
So hybrid picking is for any non-guitar players. Like I use a pick, and then I use these two fingers as well. So that's when somebody says hybrid picking, it refers to the fact that I'm not just playing with the pick. I'm using the pick and these two fingers.
Right.
So I don't know if you can see my right hand or not.
There's a little bit of a glare, but I can see it now. That's better. Here, let me get rid of this. Unfortunately, I'm going to take this off for just a second.
Okay.
There we go. Now we can see it.
So what this does is this, like, instead of, you know, for instance, if I was playing G with just the pick, I'm strumming across. You hear each string. It's just minuscule delay between the strings. But when I do the hybrid picking thing, I can hit them all at the same time, which is like a piano. You know, you're putting all your fingers down at the same time.
Yeah.
So, for me, I mean, I could not play half of what I play. Literally, I could not. I would not have my style if I didn't play with hybrid picking. And just, I know we're limited on time. I can't give you a complete.
Definitely. Yeah. Have some fun with it.
For instance, any kind of chicken picking stuff, that sound, or Albert Collins, for instance, the only way to get that sound is to use your finger. I'm just pulling up and popping the string with my middle finger. To do double stop chicken picking stuff.
Now, being a guitar player, could I break in for 1 second? That first lick that you played that was down around G, and you played that little third thing. Now, if you played that with a pick, it would have a totally different sound to it. If you did downstrokes or upstrokes,
I can't.
You hear how it sounds a little more slurred? Now we're really hearing the difference.
So there, I'm pedaling like the low string with my pick, and then the fingers are playing the notes above.
Yeah.
And then you can't play
Now
that lick without using the pick and then the middle finger. You can't. I mean, you can't.
it's just a different. Yeah, it's more like a, what do you call that? Like a flutter pick or a swoop or something. It has a totally different sound than when you get a lot of definition with the notes by using your extra fingers, and that's why hybrid picking is just such a fantastic, cool thing, and something that you've kind of really developed into your sound. If you take like the opening from All Just to Get to You, the way you play it, I mean, I hear there's like a.
I'm doing that all with the pick.
That's all pick, right? But if you take like a solo from something like Level Land, is that Barry? Is Level Land Barry?
The solo,
the James McMurtry song. The solo's not. There's like a real, and I think that there's stuff in there that reminds me of the chicken picking, where there's just such a separation of the notes. There's clarity in the hybrid picking, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, all the pedal steel stuff. I'm trying to play it quiet.
Yeah.
You know, they're using all the pick and then.
Yeah. Now, for our other guitar players who are here, first of all, I could listen to you all day. Know that you can go back and watch this video later, and you can kind of dissect a little bit and try and pick up a note or two. If you really want to get into this stuff, you really, I think, have to break it down into super, super, super small chunks. And it's not like you're going to just start flying around the neck all of a sudden just because you picked up your hybrid technique and you started doing it. But starting in small chunks, you can actually do it. Because I don't know about you, but people will go, man, he makes it look easy. I remember watching a Joe Pass video, the great jazz guitar player. And in it, he said, I don't like to play anything that's hard. And it just cracked me up because he's playing all these crazy variations of chords. But once I broke it down into little small pieces, it was like, oh no, my hand moves naturally because I'm not, I've just done it thousands of times over and over and over and over again. Do you say that to the student who wants to pick up some chicken picking and some hybrid picking?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a fair amount of teaching on that, and I have some courses that I've done that through TrueFire, and I basically try to start at square one, show them the basic principle of it, and it's like what you're talking about. Just pick two strings,
yes,
and kind of work your way up and down the neck. And if you're trying to do the pedal, it just depends whether you want to learn it from the country chicken picking thing, or more pedal tones or more of a blues thing. I've tried to in those courses try to break it out, but like you say, it's small chunks just to sort of get the fundamentals. You got to get up on the bike before you can tear around the corner. And
that's exactly right.
It really is. It's muscle memory, and that's one of the challenges for you and I right now, not playing gigs, is to keep our chops up.
Oh, I know.
So I mean, a lot of times I'm just sitting in front of if I'm watching a movie or something, I've got a guitar in my hand. I'm just trying to keep going. But yeah, it's the hybrid picking thing can be really daunting. Just like for me, if you told me I'd have to, all of a sudden I couldn't play with a pick, I had just fingers, I would be lost. I mean, because so much of half of it, I have to have a pick, just to.
Yes.
I can't do that without a pick. And it's the same thing. If you tell someone that's only played with a pick, now you've got to use your pick and two fingers. It can be daunting, but if you start with small chunks, one day all of a sudden you're up on the bike and you're cruising down the road.
You just the bike is a perfect example. It's like I practice it. Oh my gosh, I'm actually doing it. That tends to be the thing. I want to ask too. I don't usually ask my own questions. I only have one question. Hey, Stefano, nice to see you, buddy. Randy, I will get to that question in a second too. Sorry, everybody on television. I am making sure that I get as many of these questions online as I can. I noticed in your playing that you have a lot of cool ways to play power chords. This is the last technical question I'll ask for the guitar players out there. You play power chords in a lot of different ways up the neck. It's not just root fifth, root fifth, root fifth, and the politically incorrect chord moving up and down the neck. And I think it really becomes like kind of like hanging out away from the third is something that kind of makes your playing, for lack of a better term, rock. So, like, do you feel that like getting away from the third of the chord, not showing whether it's major or minor, is something that kind of keeps you? I don't know. It's just I just want you to just elaborate a little tiny bit on that.
It's a huge part of my style, and I can tell you right now, I do not play this chord.
Yeah,
I don't play bar chords like that. All 6 strings, because there's a couple of reasons. A, when you have any kind of gain on your amp, it's too much information. And also the major third to try. I mean, I'm a nut for tuning, and I really love it, the sound, and it makes me feel physically good when things are in tune. And so the major third in chords, I'm often avoiding it unless I'm just playing like a 2-note chord, like an A7, you know. But I won't go. I don't play that chord anymore. I mean, if I want that sound, I'll play this.
So few, I think so few guitar players, sorry to break in, I think so few guitar players think to themselves, what can I take out of this chord?
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I really love about your playing is that makes it kind of have your voice is the small voicings that still just have this to it, you know?
It's a lot of root 5, honestly, but with a lot of add 9, you know, or suspended note, you know, what suspensions, however you want to define a suspension for like in B. Yep.
And these chords are not necessarily like they're not what we would call tendonitis builders. No. You know, these are also chords that are really fun to form, but just your own kind of take on them.
So it's also, I also use a lot of open strings whenever I can, like in B, for like there's the opportunities are endless. Now, I will, for instance, like in the key of B, for some reason, the major third, if you use it with open strings, that sounds musical to me, and I can play that in tune.
It has a certain crunch and dissonance to it that the other keys don't have.
You know, in for instance, in the key of E, using open strings. And it's sort of, you know, it's Pete Townsend.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, this makes me want to write a song in B with you, first of all, because B is such a wonderful key. But let's take this over to another thing, because that's the thing I love about this show. We get a lot of people asking different questions, and I really, really like this one comes from Susan from KPFT, our friend Susan that we love, Susan and Doug. She says, you've written songs that have been covered from everyone from John Mayall to Leanne Womack and Rita Coolidge. And she wants to know kind of like an approach with songwriting. And is it kind of different? You know, I mean, I don't know. I know that whenever I talk to any of us who are songwriting, whether it's co-writing or anything, we kind of tend to take what's available to us. But if we, you know, I mean, like everything works. Like if I get an idea from a lick, great. If I get an idea from a bird, great. If I get an idea from whatever, thank you, I can write another song. you know, and I want it, especially if it's something that feels new in some way. But being someone who, you know, being covered by Mayall or being covered by Womack or Coolidge or co-writing with Stapleton, we've name dropped, you know, some really. I'm doing it for you, so it's not you know, it's cool. You got cool friends, you know. That's
Yeah,
what
I
it's about.
it's
But
just another part of the palette, you know. I mean,
yeah,
when I landed here, my first gig was with Lucinda Williams
right.
and then Ely, and then Ely's compadres and Mellencamp. You know, so many great songwriters that I was around. I was really inhibited to try to write for a long time, but I did developed an affinity and appreciation for great songs, and so started doing more of that. And for me, they float. They're out there floating around, and you know, it could be a riff that all of a sudden, and then I start to sing a melody. I mean, I've got hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of complete songs with just, you know, chords and me singing on a melody. It's, to me, the last thing that generally comes is the lyric in those situations. But for instance, the last two times you and I have talked on the phone, we've come up with we've just, in our conversation, we have two titles, and so
they're ready to go.
Starting with the title. Well, how do you write that title? Where does it, the title, it's not just random words that you pick out of the air. It's like something that means all of a sudden, it's like, it's hard to describe. It will resonate. And like, oh, that's a cool phrase. And
yes. I can see myself singing that.
Yeah,
or
I've heard that written, or maybe I've heard the title, but I think maybe we could write it differently. So that's, you know, just starting with a phrase, you can write a song that direction, which is completely opposite from an instrumental piece of music that you want to put lyrics to.
But you like both, right?
I like both, and I've done it combinations and, you know, permutations of it all. And you know, co-writing too. Sometimes, like when I wrote with Stapleton, sometimes we would write the whole song 50-50. Sometimes I would come in with a chorus and play the guitar, and then we would come up with a verse. Sometimes I would play some music, and in 20 minutes he had all the lyrics written.
Yeah, he's kind of a freak.
He's a freak. I mean, he's the best.
And I mean that in the nicest way.
He's the best I've ever worked with. I mean, and I knew it the minute I walked in the door, you know, 15 years ago, whenever it was, when he first got to Nashville. I knew within 5 minutes, like, this guy's different. And we wrote, every time we wrote, we got a song finished. And a couple of them have been cut, and they're great. And he's unbelievable. But in that context, it was just, we both kind of came in, you sort of keep the slate clean enough to where you're not like, well, here's what I've got, and can you come up with a lyric, you know? I might just...
If you hold on too tight, tight to it, then it's really, really can be difficult because somebody doesn't want to bring their own thing in. I've definitely had people who, number one, just take it over. You know, and I've also had people who just are so steadfast and it has to be a certain way. It's like, all right, well, cool. Just you go write that song, man.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, let's finish it. See you later.
Yeah. I mean,
it's like a song you'll never play. You know. And
our friend Lonnie Trevino Jr. is on here, and he writes a good thing that has to do with what we're talking about. He says, David, do you write a song with a vibe in mind, or does the song dictate the vibe? And I, of course, would say, you know, sometimes it's more one than the other for me, but of course it depends on the person and who I'm writing with. But I like that question because, you know, do you feel like it comes from the vibe first, or does it come from, you know, what you're writing about topic wise will dictate the vibe?
I think it goes back to what we just talked about. If it starts with the music, that sets the vibe.
Yeah. If
it starts with the lyric, then it's wide open. You know, how could we do this? I mean, I talked to a friend of mine the other day. He said something, and I said, that's the title. And he said, what? I said, we need to write that song. And so he thought, well, cool. And he sent me a couple of ideas. And it was like, one was kind of a J.J. Cale approach. One was sort of a Chuck Berry approach. And then I sent him some stuff back that was completely different than that. And it's just a matter of sort of, what does it want to be? And then being open enough, and then checking your ego at the door and acknowledging that, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you have a better idea one day and I have a better idea the other. I mean, it's like, just really, it's just to try to, it's like improvising a solo too, the same thing. I try to clean my mind out. If I come into a guitar solo thinking, man, the last time we played this song, I started down here and it was awesome, it's gonna suck. And the only time I play stuff that really means something to me, and have the experience of when I talk about levitating earlier, I'm not joking. I mean, you reach this spiritual thing is when I'm able to,
I know.
and it's like I walk into the Saxon pub or where I can really do my thing, and it's like it depends on who's there.
Oh, sure, right.
What mood are my bandmates in? Who walks up right before you go on? What happened the minute I walked out of the door of my house? But I always try to get 2 or 3 minutes before I play where I don't have to talk to anybody, just so I can wipe it, and I don't even know and a lot of times I try not to even think, what song are we going to play first until I get up there.
That's great.
That's when the good stuff happens. And it's, so with songwriting, if you can walk in with that, it's nice to have an idea to start with especially if if somebody you don't write with a lot. I mean, that's a great,
sure.
It's always good to have those in your back pocket. I wrote with, the first time I wrote with Gary Nicholson, like I had about 5 things in my back pocket and he hated all of them. And I started to
say with me,
I started to sweat. I'm like,
same thing with me the first time. He just knocks them down.
Never happened before. And I'm like, oh my God.
Oh, that's so funny. He's going to be a guest next month on this show, so we'll have a little chat about that. Okay, so we're getting closer and closer to the end of the hour. This has been super fun already. And before we go off, I only ask one question every week. That is like my question. Oh, also, Susan, thanks for putting David's latest record is in the comments. The EP live at the Saxon, or the live trio 2020 from the Saxon. Thanks for putting that in there.
It's an hour long. It's not an EP.
Oh, it's not an EP. Okay, so it's an hour long. That's a full album right there. Yes, Stefano's here. I might have said Stefano earlier. Please hit me in the head for that. I'm sorry, brother. I'm glad you're here. So thank you, Susan, for putting that there for people to check out. And here's my question that I ask everybody. What is your guilty pleasure music that people would not expect that you listen to? Something that's just like, I mean, sometimes it's a little embarrassing, like somebody likes something really poppy, maybe they're into, whatever. But and a lot of people, you got a little smile, so you're thinking of something.
Oh, I know what I'm going to say.
All right, well, I'm ready.
AC/DC.
Oh,
that's my guilty pleasure. I mean, it's like the lyrics are like, kind of on a 3rd grade level, but it's the guitar riffs and there's always like 1 or 2 songs on every AC/DC record that's got like this riff in it, and the guitars, the whole panning, the way they get the guitar sounds and the riffs and the way the two guitars work together. I mean, I just sit here with it like 120 dB going. Like on the last record, there was a song called "Play Ball," and it's like the riff in it. And then Brendan O'Brien produces those records, and he probably had something to do with that lick. But it's just badass. So, I mean, there's tons of stuff that I listen to that you wouldn't think.
Your guilty pleasure. But when we talk about AC/DC, what's great is too, you mentioned right there the fact that like one guitar is on one side, one guitar is on the other, and how that was like a huge thing, right? As far as like, and they never got away from that, but still continued to make, new songs with new riffs. And this lyric on a 12, age 12 level, they never changed that either. And it was, they never changed.
I don't know how they keep doing it, but I mean,
you've been thunderstruck, man. You've been thunderstruck.
Black. I mean,
Nah, yeah, you can't do that. Yeah. Oh, Gabriel Rhodes says that was great, guys. Hey, Gabriel, how you doing? That's another thing, man. I'm so grateful to have this as an outlet. We're getting close to the end here before we go offline, so we're gonna stay online for a couple of minutes on let's see, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, Twitch, and YouTube to make sure we get through all these questions. And when Ray Wiley was on, he was like, Jeff, that didn't feel like 20 questions. I was like, Ray, it's just a title. But I want to thank Austin Music TV. Hopefully, Sheila never got back on to say if we got on, so hopefully she didn't have to like throw some other programming on today, and we actually were on cable. I apologize. These streaming apps are all new to all of us, and I'm very, very grateful for David coming and checking this out, and and spending a little bit of time with us. And oh yeah, and thanks very much. I always forget this too. We appreciate we're splitting tips. It's nice to be able to help out another musician who's working right now. We're all doing what we can. Thanks everybody who's saying awesome show. We got about 3 more minutes. Let's see if we can get one more question in that we haven't got. YouTube single gig, we did that. YouTube's surprise influence. EP, songwriting, hybrid picking, buddy guy. Oh, this is the one I really, really love. Growing up in Kentucky, what drew you to play the guitar? And if we go off while you're answering this question, that's fine. Thanks to everybody on Austin Music TV. You can jump over. Growing up in Kentucky, what drew you to play guitar, and what was your first guitar? I love that question.
My first guitar was a Harmony acoustic that I rented at the mall.
Nice.
And took lessons at the mall from some dude with dandruff, and like the Mel Bay book. That didn't last.
The Mel Bay.
Long.
The Mel
That
Bay.
didn't last long. Then I finally got to rent a K electric, and then I got a
Bicycle pickups. Did it have the gold foils?
I think so, but I was trying to play Steppenwolf songs on that thing, and I don't know.
Wasn't gonna happen.
I got a Fender Mustang. And then I was rocking. So what drew me to the guitar was the Beatles. And I got Revolver, and specifically that lick and Got to Get You Into My Life. When the guitar apes the horn lines. That
yeah.
Lick. So if you hear that lick, that's like. That was the first lick that got me into it, and I do that kind of stuff. Bending.
It's still part of your playing.
Totally part of my playing. So that got me into it, and then AM radio stuff that was on there. But the Beatles were really huge, and then a lot of bluegrass music around Kentucky and around Louisville growing up, and then. I got Hendrix, and then I got into I had a guitar teacher who turned me on to B.B. King and Mike Bloomfield and Magic Sam, and so then that was kind of like and then my dad listened to Waylon Jennings, and then like Only Daddy That'll Walk the Line, the solo in that captivated me. Wynton Moss played that solo, so I had the country thing, the Beatles. Blues, and then I heard Wes Montgomery, and it was like all that stuff just kind of got mixed together.
Well, we try to put together our influences, and then something else comes out. That's the hope, anyway, right? Yeah. Thanks to everybody on Austin Music TV. Let me double check the time, but I think we're just about to go off there. Thank you, Austin Music TV. We appreciate you. Thank you, Sheila. Okay, so right now, whether it ended up on there or not, we are just online. And so we can, again, thanks to them, and thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it, Austin Music TV, for giving me a vehicle for this crazy, weird show that I have a lot of fun with. My buddy Chip Barnett had a question, and we're just going to answer a couple more, if it's okay with you, just to kind of round this out for the people that are still online. Chip Barnett asked, how did you have a signature PRS guitar, Paul Reed Smith, that you're playing right now, and how did that, by the way, the first time you handed me your guitar, I think we were at Antone's, and we were both playing some sort of a thing, and maybe I was lucky because you were going to sit in with whoever I was playing with, and you said, here, just try it, and I was like, ooh, and I tried it, and I remarked something about how the guitar's strings were, they felt really slinky or something about it, something about it just felt, it was just kind of butter. And your guitar is really different in a lot of ways than the other PRSs, whether it's the Santana or the McCarty or things like that. There are a lot of big differences. But Chip wanted to know how your relationship with PRS started, and just a little tiny bit on that.
Boy, that'd take a long time to really get it. But in a nutshell, when I moved to Austin, I had a Strat, and everybody in Austin played a Strat, and I just the same way, you know, we talked about intuition earlier. I had this intuitive feeling that if I was going to like separate myself in any way, I needed to get a different instrument. And I saw this ad for the a Seafoam Green PRS guitar in Guitar Player magazine, and I found one, and I bought it, and that became a huge part of that. And I got an old Marshall amp, and so two of those things together was kind of, and I got the Ely gig, and it was kind of sort of like a Telly on steroids vibe that I used with Joe for the whole time I was with him. But I met Paul in early 1987, right in the, you know, my first guitar was in 85, the first year they were in business. And I met Paul, we hit it off, and we have been working together ever since. So I've been with PRS for 35 years.
Now that we have, now that we've gone off and we can do the sort of call to action thing, please, please, please go check out these guitars. You can still get them today, and they're still, you know, one of the big sellers for them. And what an incredible thing, to have a guitar that's like to your specifications. Do you have like a couple of things that are sort of unique about yours, like one or two things that you could say, well, you know, one or two things that I worked to really make the David Grissom guitar?
I mean, the whole instrument, really. I mean, I started sort of with the PRS where they were
template,
and then we changed. I mean, it just started over this entire. We're still changing stuff. I have a call with Paul tomorrow about pickup wire. We made a lot of changes there that I wanted to make. We added an extra 1/8 of an inch of mahogany on the back to change the ratio of maple to mahogany. The control layout's different.
Was that tone, or was that for tone, or was that more for that was a tone thing?
Yeah, I wanted to get more low end out of the guitar. We changed the pickups to be more like PAFs, to be a little less mid-rangey and clearer, and that took 2 years to design these pickups. Lightweight tuners on the headstock, so you're not like dampening all the vibration. It's just, and you know, the shape of the neck is very specific. The size fret is specific. The angle that they're beveled on the edges are specific.
Yeah.
You know, the tone pot value is specified. It's all
definitely, it's a big deal, because any guitar player worth his salt, you know, well, I mean, I shouldn't say that. I should say, if you really want to get a lot out of a guitar, you learn to work the knobs a little bit, you know.
Oh, I totally. I mean, my 2-channel amp is, here's my dirty channel. Guitar turned all the way up, and that clean channels, I just turn it down a little bit.
I mean, that's incredible. I mean, that was something I used to watch. If I watched a video of Hendrix, you know, live at Montreux or something like that, and he was playing like a Rolling Stone, it was like when he went like that and just dimed it, it was such a different tone. But I couldn't believe that, you know, because I had grown up, you know, thinking, oh, well, everything is a stomp box. Everything is a stomp box, you know. And really learning so much of it is your hands and understanding your instrument as well, and that you can get so much more tone. It's not that stomp boxes aren't cool.
No, I use them. I mean, I have like 12 of them on this board that I take to the studio, because you have to have it's like having more colors of paint if you're, you know, especially for making records. But at the end of the day, these things right here are just like a microphone.
Yeah.
And your hands are the same. You're the vocalist. And so these are just reproducing what you put out. I mean, if I sat here and played, you know, I mean, you can't make. You know, you need to be. You got to smack the guitar.
Yeah, people don't think about that.
You know, you can listen. And one of the things I do at workshops, one of the first things I do is walk around the room. I'll play something through an amp, and I'll walk around the room, and I'll just. let them hear the guitar acoustically, and they're like, it's like for a good guitar players, they know this, but a lot of beginning
Yes.
guitar players and even intermediate guitar players don't get that. You hear that, it's the same. It's just not going. That's not going to sound. It's not going to sound. If you play it like, it's got to
Yep.
be. You're creating the tone and sound with your hands, and then these are
Yep.
picking that up, and then it's going out through the amp. So having a great guitar and a great amp and the right pedals and in the right order and all add to it. But the most important thing, sorry, is this.
It is.
And practicing. I mean,
There's nothing better as tone. And I think that you could also attest to this. I would challenge people that if you picked up a Strat and my eyes were closed, I'd have a pretty good chance of saying it was David Grissom. Not all guitar players are that way. And it's a testament to you kind of finding your voice from years and years and years and years of playing with your hands. And that's really, something that just doesn't happen, and that comes from all of that. Whereas, somebody like somebody I would even say of myself is like a jack of all trades and master of none. And I remember one time I was talking to you and I said, yeah, man, this buddy made this really, really great comment. He heard this tune I was on and he said, oh man, you sound great on that record. And I said, oh, cool. How did you know I played on that? He goes, oh, I just heard it and I knew it was you. Yeah. And I said, David, when I'm playing my slide, some people listen to it and they go, Jeff, oh, I can tell when it's you. And I was like, I'm not that way on guitar yet. And what you said to me was, well, crap, man, what do you want to be good at everything? And it was like, yeah, like, come on, man, like you have a thing, like just be happy you have a thing. And whatever else comes is gravy. And it put me in check in a nice, humbling way that even one person could hear something and go, oh, I knew that was Plank, but your hands more than your gear is tone and like, you can hear it, but I would say whether you're on acoustic or electric, chances are I could probably hear, I hope you take that as a compliment.
No, I do. I mean, I didn't set out to do that. Mm-hmm. Again, if I had tried to do that, I never would have gotten there. But it was just, being, especially when I was younger, just like growing up in Kentucky before internet, I was so thirsty. I drank in. If I heard, like, it could be one solo, like a Larry Carlton solo on a Crusaders record, and I would just drink that solo for, like, an Albert Lee on a Dave Edmunds record. I would. Oh yeah. So that I would do anything and everything, and it ended up being this amalgam of mishmash, or I don't know if that's a word, amalgam.
Amalgam's a word, absolutely, yeah. And it is exactly that. Yeah, yeah. It all comes out eventually coming out as you.
Yeah, it does. And I didn't set out and try to do that. But I think the thing that it's not so much the guitar is a vehicle to get there, but it's also musical choices and approach and how you back people up and the parts you choose to play. And my own records, or when I'm playing multiple parts on another record, how I construct that sonic picture that have a lot to do with my approach that I think people tell me they recognize at times too. So
quite a bit, my friend. I can say it for you. And listening is such a wonderful, wonderful part of what we do too. Not enough people think that it's not just playing, it's listening. And if you don't, you're not really part of it. You're just playing a bunch of notes. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, this has been, we could keep doing this. By the way, yes, are we listening to, Randy wanted to know if we are hearing the PRS amp right now.
Yeah, you're hearing the PRS amp. It's in the next room with the door almost shut, so it's not the ideal way to hear it, but I don't know if you can see it over here or not. Oh, go the other way, this way. It's right there, the purple thing.
Yeah. Next
to the Marshall, that's what I'm playing through. It's a 30-watt PRS amp.
Well, we could definitely. I'm so happy to see Bucka Allen and Samuel Crayhorse, Heavy Medicine. Yeah, you're right, buddy. And Frankie, thanks there. How many amps did you blow up in coming up with your PRS amp? That's kind of fun. We all blew up some amps on the road, didn't we?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've had amps go down. I don't know if I've ever like caught them on fire or anything.
I did once. Boogie sent me some amps to a Bob Schneider gig, and I put it on stage, but I don't think I blew it up. I think it blew up. It was just they sent me a dud, but it was pretty rocking, you know, because we're sitting there playing, and all of a sudden my amp's on fire. So,
Tubes,
but I
man,
can't take credit.
you can't help tubes. I mean, tubes that's what makes it sound good, and that's what catches on fire. So
Yeah. Hey, Brian Mendez, nice to see you there too, bro. And thanks you everybody for being here. David, stay on with me online here for a minute. We're going to say goodbyes to everybody. I want you to, again, thanks so much for splitting the tips. I'll be on later tonight to do my own live stream of my songs. Since we're offline, David, where should we send people besides the website? You know, anything. It's really nice. Some people already put in the chat. PRS Guitars, Product Grissom. Thanks, Ted, for putting that. Some articles are in there. Go through this chat, everybody, and find stuff about David and what he's up to. Your record is in there. Right here is your website and your Bandcamp.
right, yeah. I mean, the only place to really get my CDs right now is you go to my website and I'll sign a copy and mail it to you, or Bandcamp.
Beautiful.
Download high-res files. I love Bandcamp, and
Me too.
I have T-shirts. I have, it's like I'm in the modern era all of a sudden. So
yeah, we are a business, right?
I'm trying to stay.
Yeah. Well, and that's what you guys help out a lot with too. This interview has been a joy for me, man. I know we could stay on for an hour and people would continue to ask questions, but we'll save it. In half a year from now, I'll have you back on and we'll do it again. Everybody, thank you so much. And yeah, can't thank Austin Music TV and Sheila Steele enough. Hopefully everything went online and got on there after I don't know if I messed up or whatever. It's just the nature of the beast.
Blame it on me.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, we just
always breaking in my house. So
it was too loud. All right, thank you everybody, and we'll see you next week. I believe my guest next week is Mobley, and after that, Sarah Hickman, and I'll see you all online tonight for my live stream. Thank you all very, very, very much. Once again, Mr. David Grissom, everybody. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks everybody that tuned in. It was fun. Enjoy.